Welcome back to Weights and Wealth. Last night we were playing Catan.
Yeah, you guys beat me pretty bad. I think I only ended up with like six points or so.
Nick didn't do too well against the Roars. Some would say we probably play Catan too much, but we love board games in our family.
I'm just going to blame it on a bad starting setup. It wasn't really my fault.
If you haven't played Catan, it's our favorite board game. I think we're looking for them to sponsor the show at some point. Is that our goal here?
I would love that, yeah.
Today, we're going to be talking about the truth behind a lot of advice that you see for finances and getting rich and side hustles and tax advantages on TikTok. And then also in the same vein on the weight side, a lot of misinformation you might see on TikToks and Reels about supplements.
Yeah, I mean, social media, there's so much information out there, and it's really hard to try to decipher the good information from the bad information. If you really dive into it, you can find a lot of good stuff out there, but it's really hard to parse out.
There might be more good information on social media than bad information. I think the bad information just goes viral much easier.
Because it's a lot more entertaining.
It's more entertaining, yeah. And a lot of times it's something that's very counter to the mainstream. That's an easy way to make something go viral. So sometimes things that are counter to the mainstream are true, but sometimes they aren't. And it can be really hard to kind of decide. But I think with the growth of social media and content production, I think more and more it's on the consumer to decide for themselves what's true and what isn't, which it can be good or bad depending on the situation, I guess.
Right, because it's so easy for anybody to really get into making content now. There's really no barrier to entry. And yeah, all it really takes is having a smartphone. I mean, we invested in this sound equipment, but
for sure.
Yeah. So starting us off, there's a lot of financial advice on TikTok, a lot of ways to kind of get rich quick. One of them is to get into day trading, and it's become really popular. I know we've touched on it in a couple other episodes. And there's videos of people celebrating big wins. There's this one guy on TikTok in particular that all of his videos are just of him celebrating his wins. And
as if he wins every single time.
Yeah, of him getting into his helicopter and flying all over the place.
I feel like that's super common, not just for that guy day trading, but everything on social media. Like when you look at people lifting, you see their PRs and you see them hitting their best lifts. No one posts just like their random work sets throughout the week or their rehabs for injuries. So I feel like you do have to keep in mind social media is a highlight reel and people are not showing you either the bad parts or the bulk of their work, right?
Right, yeah, because that stuff just won't be as big of a hit.
It's boring. It doesn't go viral. Yeah, just like we were talking about earlier with what goes viral.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think I also mentioned earlier, like 90% of day traders lose 90% of their investment within 90 days. So it's something that's, you really have to know what you're doing to actually do well with it and be able to make a steady income off of it. You also have to have a big bankroll to start. Mm-hmm. Just with learning how to day trade, you're going to have losses in the beginning. And plus you're also competing against, investment bankers, people who do this full time for a living. You're also competing against AI. There's like a lot of day trading now is just done by computers.
Yeah. There's an account on Instagram, I think it's called Quiver Quant or something. I've seen it in my Discover here and there, but I think it's just this guy that has this website that uses algorithms and tracks a bunch of different things like senators and House members that trade. It like tracks their trades, and you can follow what they do, because the insider trading that obviously goes on and probably shouldn't be allowed. But he has different algorithms, I think, that track stuff like that. And like as you're saying, how do you think just by picking stocks you're gonna beat someone like that? Like I feel like when people, especially with social media, the whole Dunning-Kruger curve with like, at first you think you know a lot, and then later on as you learn more, you learn how much you don't know. I feel like especially with teenagers that see stuff on social media, they might see a lot of reels in one category or TikToks in one category, and they think they know a ton about it. And it's like, it's pretty ignorant to think that you can become an intermediate on a subject just by watching a bunch of TikToks.
Right. I mean, a lot of like anything worth knowing takes years and years and years to learn.
Yeah.
And that's certainly the case with day trading. Some other advice that I see on TikTok is just to start an LLC and run all of your personal expenses through it. That is not how an LLC works at all.
Yeah.
An LLC doesn't let you take any more deductions for a business than you could without an LLC. All it does is really provide legal protection.
But if you open an LLC like some of these TikTokers are recommending and put your personal expenses through it, it doesn't even provide you with protection if you get sued. I think it's called piercing the corporate veil. Is that right?
Yeah. If you have, like a business should have its own bank account. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't really be linked with any of your own personal cards or anything like
and
that.
And if you're just
keep them
using it for personal expenses or just paying yourself at random and you're not like on a set kind of payment schedule, I think it's really easy for in court it be determined that you're just piercing the corporate veil, and then the LLC provides zero protection. So even if you are doing a legit side hustle or small business and you do create an LLC and you have like good intentions with it, it's important to make sure that you're doing it correctly as far as what expenses you're putting on that business account, and that you're paying yourself on some sort of set schedule or interval so that you can't be held liable if you do get sued for something like that.
Right. Yeah. And then one of the other big things that I see out there is expensing vehicles. Mm-hmm. Buying an SUV over 6,000 pounds, which is true. You can take the full expense for that in the year that you purchase it. But you're still spending, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 on a vehicle for savings of max really 37%. So it's not some
a lot
trick.
Of times business owners will say their accountant told them at the end of the year to offload X number of thousands of dollars on capital, which could be considered the SUV over 6,000 pounds. But I think it's important for people to actually consult with an accountant in that scenario instead of just listening to the TikTok advice, right?
Right. And there are good business situations to do that. Mm-hmm. But that is on a case-by-case basis.
It's not just for the individual person that opens an LLC. Like me with TedsLift Help, and I train some people, but it's a part-time job, and I'm not making enough to be able to write off the SUV with any kind of benefit.
Right. So that wouldn't make sense in your situation.
Although the TikTokers might tell you it will.
Yeah.
Anything else on the finance side today?
That's about all I have there's a lot more TikTok advice out there, but I think those are two of the bigger ones that I see.
A lot of reels. I'm not on TikTok personally, but reels are essentially TikToks, and I see a lot of them that go into tax savings on real estate, and a lot of them seem too good to be true. But I do know that the tax code is set up to benefit people that invest in real estate. But maybe later on we could do an episode about some of those tax advantages and what's true, what's not that you see on TikTok.
Yeah, we certainly could. Real estate does have its own tax advantages, depreciating a house, 1031 exchanges, stuff like
Leveling
that.
up with the
That's all true.
1031s.
Yeah. So that's all true because like the government really does want to incentivize buying real estate. So
yep. You may notice before we transition over to the weight side today that I have the world's best boss mug and Nick does not.
Does that mean you're the self-proclaimed CEO of Weights and Wealth?
I think on our business license, you're actually the CEO.
I think I marked myself CFO.
Oh, okay.
So
that would make sense.
I don't know who's the CFO.
Am I CWO? Chief Weights Officer?
Chief Weights, yeah.
All right, moving on to our supplements portion, the weights side of today's episode. There's a lot of bold claims out there for a lot of supplements that are kind of garbage.
What are some supplements that are garbage?
I'm not sure if you heard when Bang filed for bankruptcy because they were getting sued by, I think, Monster and a couple different companies, but they were making all these claims about things that drinking Bangs could cure. And like dementia was one of them, I think. And then it wound up coming out that their creatine in the Bang drinks, their super creatine formula didn't even contain any creatine in it. So like a lot of these companies, a lot of supplement companies, what they put in their supplements, what they say they put in their supplements is not what they put in their supplements. And they're not regulated by the FDA. So unless the supplement company that you're buying from has third-party testing, you don't actually know what's in the supplements. And there have been cases in the past where supplements were spiked with like steroids and other things that do work to get people results that they think the supplement's working, and it's not what they think it is. That there's a huge thing with pro hormones, but that was before our time really in the gym. But a lot of times you might not actually know what you're getting when you buy supplements. So I always recommend that people go through a company that does third-party lab testing on all of their supplements.
Yeah, I remember hearing something about Bucked Up a while ago. I don't know if that was true or not, but something about them including deer antler or testosterone, something like that
deer
in one of their
spray,
pre-workouts.
I don't know. I didn't hear that story, but deer antler spray is, I think it got banned from the NFL. I think, I don't really know what I'm talking about here, but I think it got banned from the NFL. I think people used it for essentially like growth hormone. Mm-hmm. But along with what you're not sure of what you're getting in your supplements, a lot of times also with protein powders, you may be getting heavy metals and stuff in the supplement. So I know with a lot of plant proteins, that's common. They've done testing of different protein powders, and some of the plant protein powders will have pretty high levels of heavy metals in them, which are very toxic to you to consume. So I think definitely if you are buying supplements, go through a company that does third-party lab testing. And moving on to supplements that do work versus don't work, there are some supplements that we have a lot of testing on. Creatine, for example, the most studied supplement. We know that it works. We went over in somewhat of a shallow high school biology, chemistry depth on one of the earlier episodes how creatine works. And supplements aren't going to get you your results. They might help, but like it's not the supplements that's going to cause you to gain a bunch of muscle, unless you're using super supplements like anabolics. But like we have to keep in mind when you're using like pre-workout and creatine, like that stuff might be responsible for like a couple % of your results. I think a lot of times people look to the supplements as a magic pill they can take that's going to get their results for them. Have you ever done that? Like when you started working out and you thought that taking a supplement every day was what was going to finally gain you some muscle?
Yeah, I thought as soon as I started taking just protein powder that I would all of a sudden just put on a bunch of muscle and all my weights would start shooting up.
It's good marketing by the supplement companies. They always get the bodybuilders and these super jacked and shredded people who oftentimes are enhanced lifters to sponsor their supplements. So it's kind of disingenuous, I think, to the average person. When we look at protein powder, for example, you don't need protein powder. At the end of the day, you just need to hit your protein levels. We talked in an earlier episode how we recommend 1 gram per pound, 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. And you can hit that through whole foods, which I would argue is probably better than hitting it with protein powders. But if you struggle to hit that protein level just through your normal diet, that's a time where, that protein powder is going to help you. Mm-hmm. Back with the creatine, I want to make sure before we move on from the creatine, it's not just a supplement to help you build muscle. It pretty reliably will help with that, with muscle and strength gains. But it's also just in general a good health supplement that I think everybody should take. We all remember from high school biology that the mitochondria is the
powerhouse of the cell.
Yeah. For some reason, that was just like drilled into our brains.
Beat into our heads.
It's like everybody that went to public high school knows that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. But when we look at creatine, it helps your mitochondria perform better and create energy faster and better. So that works for all the cells in your body, not just your muscle. There's a lot of studies that show it's really good for your brain, for cognition, and for brain health and heart health. So I think everyone should take creatine. It's completely natural. You find it in meat, you find it in fish, and most people aren't eating enough meat like you and I are, where we might be getting that 3 to 5 grams of creatine through the meat. And then also when you cook your meat, you're not going to absorb all of the creatine that's in it. So I still supplement with creatine even though I eat 2 pounds of meat a day often.
Yeah, and how much creatine should people be supplementing with? Because I know when I first started lifting, I heard you should load your creatine, do a week at 20 grams, and then a week at 10, and then down to 5, and then a week at 0.
So the whole idea behind the loading phase is just to hit saturation more quickly. More quickly.
They both work.
The more that you load or consume higher levels of creatine, in theory, the quicker you'll hit that saturation point and your mitochondria will have enough creatine in them. But if you just take 3 to 5 grams a day, it might take you longer to hit that saturation point, but it still works. So I personally don't load because I don't want to be just wasting and peeing out creatine that I'm paying for, even though creatine is very cheap. So I just go with a scoop, which is most supplements that have creatine in them, a scoop is 5 grams because 3 to 5 grams is the recommended dosage per day. So,
yeah, I mean, I have kind of noticed the price of creatine has gone up recently since the pandemic started.
Yeah, inflation. What can you do?
I know.
There are ways to get creatine cheaper versus more expensive versions. Creatine monohydrate is the most studied form of creatine. You should go with creatine monohydrate. It's very cheap. Everybody gets it from the same source. However, some companies will make it more expensive by adding other things to it. The creatine that I usually take has other stuff added to it. I get mine through Legion, which, full transparency, I do have an affiliate link for. So when I advertise for Legion, there could be other motives there. But I do get it with other things in it just because I like the full post-workout formula that they have. But you can get creatine for very cheap if you just go with creatine monohydrate. A lot of the TikTokers and influencers will try to push other forms, but these other forms are just coming from supplement companies that realize they can't make a profit off creatine. So they're saying, hey, try this other form of creatine that people don't know about that works better. And it's like $35 instead of $15, and it doesn't even work as well as creatine monohydrate. So if you're getting creatine, get creatine monohydrate. And like I said earlier, I always recommend that the company you go through has third-party lab testing so you know what you're getting. Moving on, we hit creatine, we hit protein. I guess caffeine could be the next one. Pre-workouts' main ingredients are caffeine. It works. Mm-hmm. When you take 200 grams of caffeine or 200 milligrams, sorry, do not take 200 grams. You will die. 200 milligrams of caffeine is a pretty common dose, up to 300 in a lot of these pre-workouts. You feel it when you go to the gym, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, you really shouldn't be taking more than what? Is it double or triple your body weight in terms of grams?
I guess that'd be a good recommendation. When we look at pre-workouts, it seems like over time the companies just throw more and more caffeine in them because you build up a tolerance to it, and they want their pre-workout to be the most insert adjective that they brand their pre-workout with. But yeah, 200 milligrams is a lot of caffeine, and I personally have switched from pre-workout to just a cup of black coffee before most of my workouts. But pre-workouts, oftentimes you'll see proprietary blends. I hit on this earlier with the Bang Super Creatine. That's called a proprietary blend, and essentially it's like multiple things, but they don't tell you the amount of each ingredient that are bundled into this ingredient. So it might say super creatine on the label, and it's like a trademarked ingredient, and then within that super creatine is 5 other ingredients, but you don't know the amount of each of those 5 ingredients that's in their proprietary blend super creatine. So you don't really know what you're getting or how much you're getting. And I mean, that's the reason I use Legion, because they tell you exactly how much of everything they put in, and they put studies on it to back it up. Code TedsLift.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important to know exactly what you're putting into your body. Like, a lot of these supplement brands just don't tell you, and you really should know everything that's going into your body.
Absolutely. Another supplement category we can talk about is micronutrients. I wrote down a list of some of the deficiencies we have here in micronutrients in America. So across the U.S. population, 100% of people have potassium deficiencies, 94.3% of people have vitamin D deficiencies, 91.7% of people have a choline deficiency, vitamin E, 88.5% of the population, vitamin K, 66.9% of the population, magnesium, 52.2% of the population, calcium, 44.1% of the population, vitamin A, 43% of the population, and vitamin C, 38.9% of the population. I think a lot of these deficiencies stem from the amount of processed foods in our diet. We talked about in, I think, the first episode, the whole foods versus processed foods, and how 60% of the average American's diet is made up of processed foods, which are really high in energy or calories and really low in micronutrients. But these deficiencies, I think people became a lot more aware of them during the pandemic, when all the statistics started coming out about the correlation between vitamin D deficiency and mortality rates of the virus, and magnesium and zinc deficiencies. Some of these deficiencies were really strongly correlated with the mortality rates and the severity of illness that people struggled with in the pandemic.
Yeah, because I think if you look at deaths from COVID along the Sun Belt, there were the mortality rate was lower because people in the South are able to get more vitamin D throughout the year.
One of the things that although I do prefer the climate up north back in Wisconsin and in upstate New York, one of the things that I do like about living down south is just year round I'm able to go on shirtless walks and get vitamin D. Like it might be like December and January, maybe a little bit of February where it's like consistently under 60 or 70 and can't really just go outside on a shirtless walk, but I feel like I'm able to get so much sunshine compared to when I lived Rochester, New York. It was gray skies and cold majority of the year, but
yeah, and this might be a little bit of bro science, but okay. I've heard on a couple podcasts that some guys will sun their balls. Is there any sort of validity to that? Or
I have seen a study that it spikes some androgen levels when you do that, but I think a lot of that is just kind of what we were talking about earlier with the like the viralness of some of these extreme behaviors. I feel like in general, if you just get sunshine, you'll get your vitamin D in. But there are some studies that have also been done with red light. So when you look at the spectrum of light, specifically red light penetrates the skin a little bit deeper and affects your mitochondria. We were talking about powerhouse the cell earlier. So there are quite a few studies that show that red light is able to penetrate the skin and increase your mitochondrial activity. So I guess that would make sense that red light on your balls would help increase your testosterone levels. Maybe I'll see if I can find any studies on whether or not that works for another episode. But that's why the emergence of like red light saunas has really exponentially grown in the past couple of years.
Yeah, so I've heard you can also buy your own red light online.
Yeah, there are companies that sell red light panels, but something you have to keep in mind when you're looking for a red light panel is it's not just like a light bulb that someone painted red. It's a different it's a different wavelength on the spectrum of light. So I'm not good enough at physics to understand how they change the light bulbs to make them work that way, I guess. But maybe it would be something fun to learn about. But there are some companies, I know the Mind Pump guys are sponsored by Juve, and I guess if you are looking for a red light panel, a good indication would probably be price. If it's more expensive, there's a better chance that you're actually getting real red light and not just a crappy tinted bulb.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly get what you pay for.
Yep, absolutely. That's true for supplements as well, for sure. A lot of the supplements that are more expensive, the companies that are more expensive, the reason they're more expensive, because a lot of these companies source their supplements from the same places. A lot of the reason that one company might be more expensive over another is solely based off the cost of the third-party lab testing for their supplements. One last thing with some of these micronutrient deficiencies is, I mean, the whole food diet, and especially more of like an animal-based diet that we kind of advise here at Weights and Wealth, even though we don't give medical or financial advice. Disclaimer. That animal-based whole food diet is really going to maximize your micronutrient intake, and it's going to be bioavailable micronutrients, right? So a lot of times the difference between animal foods and plant foods is the micronutrients within the animal foods are going to be a lot more bioavailable, meaning your body is able to incorporate that form of the vitamin or mineral and actually use it, right? So when we look at vitamin A, for example, the vitamin A that you find in carrots and sweet potato, that form of vitamin A, your body's not going to absorb that form of vitamin A as well as it will absorb vitamin A that you find in liver, for example. So you can eat an ounce of liver.
Not raw.
Yeah. You can eat an ounce of liver and absorb way more vitamin A than you would in eating like 2 carrots and a sweet potato. It's just the beta carotene forms. There's a huge difference in how your body is able to absorb these micronutrients. And I think that gets lost on people a lot when they're taking some of these multivitamins that have sources of these vitamins and minerals that you're just going to pee you right out because your body's not going to absorb them.
Is that the case with a lot of supplements too?
Yeah, I would say that's the case with a lot of supplements. But again, it just depends on where you're getting the supplement from and the form of these different things in the supplements. I guess it would probably be good for us to do an episode in the future where maybe we go through a lot of these different vitamins and minerals and just go through which forms studies show that are more bioavailable, so people can look at some of the supplements they're taking and see if they're taking a form that their body's actually going to absorb or not. That'd probably be a good episode for us to do down the line.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us at another episode here of Weights and Wealth. That's all we got for you today. Please make sure to follow us on the social media that you tend to use. And if you feel so inclined, leave a review and let us know how we're doing.
Yeah, and if you really love it, share it with one of your friends, just spreading some knowledge around. You can help them out.
And definitely reach out to us and tell us topics that you would like us to address. Thank you.